Welcome to Thursday Brunch, and a huge, very special warm welcome to our VIP, no expense spared guest, James Cumming.
Thanks, Tony. Excited to be here. Looking forward to this, I think, just about.
It's going to be great. Like we said earlier, James, what the heck could go wrong? You know, there's just 50 odd of your closest networking colleagues who all know that you're the managing director of Refined Recruitment. And if anything does go wrong, I'm sure they will not hold it against you. I think you'll be fine.
Yes, no pressure. Thanks. I was going to strap on a beard this morning, but I couldn't quite find one in time. But no.
If life has taught me anything, James, is not to try and compete with Stuart on the beard front. But a big thank you, James, for stepping in. Stuart is fine. He is alive and well. He just has to be somewhere else, unfortunately. But in his place, we have the wonderful James. And James, you're ready and you're good to go?
Absolutely. It's great to be back. It's been 3 months since our last Thursday brunch, and today we're talking about business as unusual. And we've got 3 wonderful guests, so looking forward to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, James, who have we got joining us today?
Okay, so today we're joined by Natalie Nahai. Natalie is an international speaker and author. Her latest book is Business Unusual. Who would have thought? Great topic for this event, which was published just last month. We're also talking to Gethin Nadine. He's Director of Wellbeing at Benefex, an award-winning psychologist, author, and global employee experience influencer. And finally, we're delighted to welcome Luke Key. Luke's head of culture at the SEO agency Redico, and they've been ripping up the rulebook for years when it comes to the world of work.
Awesome, awesome. And we also have 60 seconds with. We'll be hearing from you and Emily, James, at Refined. We have a Q&A at the end with 2 of our guests. If you'd like to attend the Q&A, please just stay on the call. I just recommend it so much. It's a wonderful 40-minute conversation live with our guests where you get the opportunity to ask them anything you want. It's a really great discussion. So please, if you do have a bit of time at 9:30, please do stick around. And we have a new competition, James. We have a new competition called There's No Such Thing as a Free Brunch. So let's have a quick look at that, shall we?
No such thing as a free brunch.
There we go. Like we said at the beginning, no expense spared, ladies. No expense spared.
That's right, Tony.
The Christmas fund there, haven't we, James, for that one?
No such thing as a free brunch, apart from here on Thursday brunch, Tony. That's it. And to kick off this new season of brunches, we've got a triple prize to give away. So Stuart's done us a little video to explain more about it.
Hi, everyone. I'm really sorry I can't be with you today, but let me ask you, how's James getting on so far? Let me share details of an amazing prize bundle that we're giving away this morning. And first up, we have 5 copies of Natalie's book, Business Unusual, which you've heard all about already this morning. The really exciting news is every copy has been signed. I did it just a couple of moments ago with my Sharpie pen. So that's the first thing in the prize bundle. With each book, we're also giving away a bar of Masgrove's homemade handmade chocolate that Tony and I have carefully crafted. Each one comes with a very unique footprint pattern, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. And then finally, the first 3 names that we pull out are all going to get a bag of coffee from our very good friends at 200 Degrees. It smells absolutely gorgeous. I must say, I am thinking of hooking up with this Brazilian love affair later on this afternoon. So who knows? There may be 2 bags left. So put your name in the hat and good luck.
A bar of Masgrove's chocolate, Tony. That's as rare as a ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
I know. You forget your MBE and your OBE. The only game in town is a bar of Masgrove's chocolate. Chocolatiers to the rich and famous, James.
Yes, well, we'll show you how you can win one of these fabulous prizes later on.
We will indeed. Now, the last bunch we did was way back in May when we asked, how do Scandinavians do it better? And the it being work. And it seems that you absolutely love the show. So thanks as ever for getting involved. And we just thought we'd share some of the comments from people out there. First off, a massive hello to Laura Moore from People Asset Management over there in the wonderful Coventry. Laura said, absolutely loved my first Thursday brunch. What a way to start the day. Thank you so much.
So glad you found your way here, Laura. Welcome to the Thursday Brunch show.
And we also had to say a very good morning to Emer Lynham, who's Chief People Officer at Lumen, who I think you know, Emer, James, that's right?
I do, yes.
Yeah. And Emer said, this was great. She said, each of the speakers were engaging. And like most of the audience, I was left wanting to hear more. It's a great way to start the day. Well done all. So thank you, Emer.
Thanks for coming, Emer. Thursday Brunch, truly global. Coventry, Gerrards Cross, London, the world.
Yeah,
So,
London, Paris, Peckham, fantastically. And finally, a massive good morning to Nadine Jones, who is in a little place called London Town. Nadine says via LinkedIn, she says it was a brilliantly entertaining and thought-provoking. Lots of practical insights. So thank you, Nadine, very kind of you. And nice to know that the people down in London are still thinking about us here on Thursday Brunch.
yeah, we really appreciate your feedback. So thanks for your comments. And do let us know what you think of today's show. On that point, I suppose, if you want to share anything on LinkedIn, the hashtag is hashtag Thursday Brunch. So feel free, take a screen grab, post a comment, mention your brilliant new presenter, obviously. Whatever you'd like to share would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Sorry, James, I pressed the wrong button there, but I don't think anybody noticed. Right, James, shall we get started? Would you like to know what we're talking about today?
I would, yes.
Awesome. Let's get stuck into this. So even before the pandemic, some companies had found a different way of thinking about work, but most of us caught up with that because of the pandemic forced us to think differently. So with that in mind, because I am our resident nerd, I'd like to share 3 wonderful facts about the future of work. Are you ready? Brilliant. Strap yourself in because I will be asking questions later. Okay, fact number 1. Did you know that 2 out of 3 people who worked remotely during the pandemic want to be able to split their time between the workplace and the home?
Who would have known? To be treated like an adult to do what you want to do. Interesting. Interesting.
That's never going to catch on, is it? That's not why I came to work, says everybody. Fact number 2, 3/4 of the people want their employer to proactively get involved in the world around them. Making and selling stuff is simply not just enough anymore.
Yeah, there are some great purpose-driven companies. My personal favorite is Gymshark, a local business success story. I think they really lead the way in having a purpose.
Yeah,
I think loads of businesses now kind of recognizing this, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the labor market is taking over. It's not just entrepreneurs who are saying it. People are saying, this is an expectation. This is what I want to see from my employer.
It's definitely a client-driven market at the moment for talent.
Well,
so,
yeah, absolutely. But you know better than most, James, being in the recruitment business is what you do every day. And fact number 3 is that I think this was a McKinsey fact that around 360 million jobs are predicted to be replaced in part or in full by automation and artificial intelligence by 2030.
Wow, 360 million jobs. I think that's the population of what, the USA, UK, EU maybe combined.
Certainly the workforce of those areas. Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that. Yeah, it's not going to affect you though, is it, Tony? I don't think. Be sunning yourself on some beach by then, I'd imagine. So.
I think so. Yes. I think you could be right, but you never know. You never know. Looking at my current pension, I think I've got to retire about 89. So we'll have to see how that all pans out.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, look, I think we're just about ready for our guests, aren't we? So do you want to go and get ready?
I will. I'll go and do the necessary. Good luck.
Cheers. Right, from that bombshell, let's talk about our first guest, shall we? I'm delighted to welcome Natalie Nahai. Natalie's an international speaker and author. She also gives keynotes, runs workshops, hosts webinars on the dynamics behind evolving consumer behaviors, and she works with clients such as Google, Unilever, and Harvard Business Review. Natalie is a member of the Human Behavior Council, hosts various podcasts, including several Guardian podcasts, and she also contributes to media outlets, including the BBC, Sky, and Radio 4. So, Tony, over to you.
yourself, for your team members, and for the business as a whole.
And I know that you've been thinking about this concept of business unusual for some time. Where did the inspiration come from?
Well, so I was actually finishing a 3.5-year realist art course in Barcelona, which is where I live. And 2 weeks before we finished the final project, which is a massive painting that we have to do, the lockdowns kicked in. It was about a week or 2 weeks before they happened in the UK. And so I didn't get to finish the course at the time. And I had been thinking that I should probably think about what I want to talk about in my business, because most of what I do is keynotes and webinars and workshops. And I had been mulling over the idea of a new book around consumer psychology, but wasn't really sure exactly what the topic was going to be. And then the pandemic hit, and I thought, oh, maybe this is a good way to broach the subject. Like, how do we deal with uncertainty? How do we take insights from research and apply them so that we can, for instance, build psychological safety, or we can reorient our business around values that we cherish? There's this amazing window of time in which I think people, and still I think we're still there, are more open about making deeper changes and addressing some of the shifts in priorities that we've seen in everybody's lives. So that was really the impetus. It's kind of, I want to talk about some of the subjects that are more interesting and exciting to me. And then the pandemic happened, and I thought maybe I can use this to help in some small way as we try to build our way out of this.
And you mentioned the pandemic a couple of times there, Natalie. How important has the pandemic been in the short term to how businesses run, do you think?
Well, if we're talking about the knowledge industry, so all the businesses that were able to migrate online, and of course there are a lot that were not, then obviously there's a massive scramble for digital transformation and looking at how people interact differently online, and there's a lot of research around that, how to retain a sense of culture and belonging and connection in an atomized and agile workforce that's working from home, how to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. And for those people who weren't able to take their business, I'm thinking teachers, carers, people who work in physical environments where they can't suddenly stop building work or working at the checkout. Obviously that sector of people, my parents are teachers, so I sort of hear it from their perspective as well, had to think differently about what they're going to bring to the table and whether they have the privilege to be able to make these sorts of switches online. But I think the key idea, I guess, of the pandemic is that in our response to the pandemic is how can we use what we have available to us to maintain a sense of relationship, belonging, to be able to help us to live. So for even those of us who weren't able to work online, there were still questions around maintaining relationship with loved ones, being able to feel as though you're still part of a bigger world than just the four walls in which you inhabit. So there's lots of themes that kind of cropped up across those different areas.
And I know one of the big themes that you talk about is organizational resilience. Tell us more.
Okay, so resilience, broadly speaking, is about our ability to, quote unquote, kind of bounce back when we experience adversity and setbacks. It's our ability to kind of pick ourselves up, brush ourselves off, and move forward without a long-term detrimental impact. And so when we think about resilience in organizations of any kind, you've got to think about it in several different levels. So you have the level of the individual. How equipped is someone to be able to look after their mental health, to be able to function in a way that they have self-determination, so autonomy, that's about agency in your life, looking at competence, the skills to be able to enact your goals, and relationship and belonging. So if we're thinking about the individual, those are some of the things that need to be there for people to bounce back. Then on an organizational level, it kind of sort of opens back out again. You think, okay, well, as well as self-determination, we also need a greater sense of purpose. What are we doing this for? If you're figuring out some ways to work in which, you know, you've got all of these distractions at home, maybe you're in a flat share, maybe you have children, maybe you have a spouse or partner or partners or people that you're having to look after, what's going to keep you motivated, intrinsically motivated, in the face of all of these other competing demands, in the face of burnout? So then resilience becomes about purpose, about having clear sets of values. And it's also about having the psychological safety to be able to raise concerns with your virtual team, to be able to voice ideas that maybe previously would have been shut down because of leadership being staged in hierarchies that meant that maybe you were too in a position that wasn't senior enough, let's say. So I think those things around purpose, values, psychological safety, all of these things feed into how we can build resilience in organizations.
And Natalie, are we born with a set amount of resilience, or is it a bit like playing a musical instrument that we can get better and better at being resilient as we get older?
I think there are certainly skills that we can equip ourselves with and practices to help build our resilience. So one of the things that help us to cope with adverse experiences in life is to have an explicit set of values that we adhere to. And I think one of the things that I learned in the pandemic is that often these things are implicit. We don't necessarily think about, well, what drives me. We have natural preferences that seem to arise as if from nowhere. But of course, if we take the time to think, well, what is it that I care about most? What kind of impact do I want to have in the world? Then being able to be explicit about those values and really inquire into what they are, that can give us an anchor point or North Star that enables us then to deal with adversity in a different way. Also things like, and these are sort of basic tactics, reframing failure as feedback. That's also an important aspect to look at when we're thinking about resilience. It's also about looking at the small ways in which we touch other people's lives. So what are the things that I give by being in this world? So there are lots of different techniques and tactics that you can do and engage in to build resilience.
And can you give us an example of an individual or maybe an organization that demonstrated resilience and the benefit that it brought?
Sure. So there is a chap called Dan Price, who is the CEO of a company called Gravity Payments. They're based out in Seattle. And even prior to the pandemic, he'd made quite a lot of headlines by changing the way that he remunerated his staff. So Gravity Payments is a company that gives lines of credit to small and medium-sized enterprises. So a lot of small businesses and startups rely on them to be able to get themselves off the ground. And so he had realized that the people within his organization, within his company, were not able, many of them, to get mortgages, to meet their rental payments, to get insurance for medical and health needs. And so he raised the minimum wage to $70,000, which is a lot. And he took his own massive pay cut. I mean, obviously he was already a millionaire in his 30s, but he took a big pay cut and decided to change the way in which he exchanged value with his employees. The pandemic hits, and within a few months, they realized that if they don't do something drastic, they're going to end up having to fire people. And so they end up having a collaborative conversation with their employees to say, well, what are we going to do? What are the options that we can come up with so that we don't have to go under, we don't have to fire people, and we don't have to hike up our interest rates on the lines of credit for small businesses that are going to go under if we do this. Like, it was an intractable, apparently intractable conundrum. And they ended up coming up with the solution of the employees and the staff who proposed this, taking pay cuts over a series of months, some of them even freezing their own salaries, to make sure that they had a business to come to, that they didn't have to increase interest on lines of credit. And that enabled the organization, the company, to survive and for people not to get fired. And for me, that was a really moving example of what can be done when you have a leader in a position of authority who has the economic ability to put their values and principles into practice and to put the well-being of the organization first and really look at what that means. And then the extraordinary culture that creates and the sense of reciprocity that engenders. And now he's on kind of this campaign path very visibly to get big organizations, well, indeed, organizations of any kind, to think about actually how they remunerate and value the people that work there. He's very vocal across social channels, and I encourage everyone watching and listening to check him out because he's really an interesting trailblazer in this space.
Wonderful. That's a great story, and that's a specific story. If we take a few steps back, Natalie, generally speaking, do companies who work unusually, and you can define unusually how you see fit, do they tend to be more successful than orthodox companies?
I would suggest in the large part, yes, because if we're thinking about how people conceive of unusual, it's usually that which is outside of the norm. And I think, or certainly from a lot of the interviews I conducted for the book, there was 22 interviews for the book, a lot of the people I spoke with who are heads of enterprise and who work in the space of advising large companies how to conduct themselves, a lot of these people were saying, well, it's only in 2 or 3 brief years that we started people in boardrooms talking about and taking seriously purpose and meaning and these kind of existential or fluffy, I mean, they're not fluffy, they're kind of core pivotal questions, but bringing these questions to the top of organizations and actually having serious discussions about what it means. And now we're talking about things like the Great Resignation, why people are leaving their jobs, why they're deciding to hang up 10 years in a corporate environment or any other kind of environment. And I think the businesses that have had an understanding of this for a while, that have been on the outside of the norms of turning up to work, you do it for extrinsic purposes, you do it for finance, you do it for, you know, prestige, whatever, they're having to suddenly look at the unusual businesses on the outside of that and say, well, what is it that they're doing that is enabling them to attract and retain the best talent? That means that, you know, for instance, they are giving people paid leave to deal with the trauma of the last 18 months, that they are enabling people to work from home, they're supporting parents to get paid leave, whatever their gender. All of these specific things that are perhaps not yet normative show us that there are better, more robust and resilient ways to do business. So for me, these are some of the qualities that come into doing business unusual, and the reasons why we're now looking to these sorts of examples to model our own organizations behind.
Natalie, a final question for you. What are your 3 top tips for organizations who may want to work unusually?
It kind of weaves back into the themes that I alluded to earlier. So figure out what are the values that drive you. You can check out the valuesmap.com, which I created, which is a free tool which will help you go through a survey and see what it is that actually that means for your business. So figure out the values that drive you. Make sure that you are understanding how psychologically safe your space is. That's the ability to be able to disagree and dissent respectfully and generate new ideas, no matter your stage in the hierarchy. So psychological safety is really important. And thirdly, how are you giving people self-determination, autonomy, competence, and relatedness? How are you enabling them to thrive in your organization? And where might there be room for improvement? So those 3 things are what I would suggest people look at.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Natalie. It's been great to speak to you.
My pleasure, likewise.
Wow, what a great speech from Natalie. I love how she shared around people genuinely believing in, I suppose, being part of the solution. And I think the example she gave about Dan Price, you know, a CEO who really owns it and believes in his people rather than, you know, having those values laminated on the wall. People are our biggest asset. So yeah, some great examples there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, James. I think it's great when we can bring it to life, and you know, it, like you say, it comes from a laminated set of values behind a reception desk to something which you can actually see in the real world. And I thought it was really interesting how Natalie returned to some topics that our regular Thursday brunch viewers will know all about, like values, culture, and the role of purpose in creating a workplace that actually works for people. You know, this isn't just the soft stuff. This is the really, really important stuff that drives businesses forward. So that was great to hear that.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Natalie. And if you want to hear more of Natalie's thoughts, you could in her new book, Business Unusual. And it's competition time where you could win a free copy. So listen up.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Excellent. Right. To win a copy of Natalie's book, plus a bar of Masgro's chocolate and some wonderful coffee, courtesy of 200 Degrees, we're going to ask you a question about Natalie. Are you ready?
Now, we might have a little bit of a technical problem here, James, because I got a couple of messages from people saying that the first bit of Natalie's interview was muted. And the answer to the question was in the first bit of Natalie's interview. So I don't know when people heard this. But the good news is we're going to find out very quickly. And I have got question B, if the answer to question A was muted. So when I was chatting to Natalie there, she told us where she lives. So the first 5 people to write, here we go.
No messing.
So the first 5 people to write where she lives owe me £300 each. So a big thank you to Paul Knight, Jessica Ritchie. You can just send the money to Thursday Brunch, Birmingham. That'll be absolutely fantastic. Okay. Okay, we have a panel of independent judges who are going to verify that everybody has written Barcelona correctly, because that was the right answer. And Natalie, is very kindly, as well as doing the Q&A, she's going to announce who our winners are at the end of the show.
Brilliant. Okay, so here at Refined, we're a big sponsor of the NSPCC, and Emily in our team is on the Birmingham Business Board for funding. So it's a charity that's close to our heart. So we recorded a little clip to tell you what they've been doing recently. As we're talking about business as usual today on Thursday Brunch, we wanted to share with you what's been going on with our charity partner, the NSPCC. For those that don't know the NSPCC, they do some fantastic work, obviously looking after children. They also run Childline. And like a lot of charities, they've been severely hit by the pandemic. I think if anything, you know, when you look at the work the NSPCC does, given what's been going on with children being stuck at home for the last 18 months, their work's never been more important. And unfortunately, you know, their funding efforts have been curtailed. So we thought we'd bring that to life for you a little bit today. And Emily's part of their Birmingham Business Board for fundraising. So she might give you a bit of a steer on what's been going on.
Yeah, so I think the Birmingham Business Board's job is to fundraise for the NSPCC and to keep protecting children. But clearly the last 18 months, the sort of large events and fundraisers haven't been able to happen. So we've had to look at things slightly differently, and that's where it kind of fits in with today's theme. So we've been doing lots of virtual events. We've been doing different sporting events and online events, obviously just not face-to-face things, and still been able to raise a fair bit of money. I actually did the virtual London Marathon last year, which I think I've only just about recovered from. But I think with things going back to normal, we are starting to do live events, but we do want to keep up with the business as unusual theme and continue to sort of think outside the box and do more.
As Emily might not remember, we did our first face-to-face meeting on Friday for the NSPCC, which was a fantastic event. But for those that know Emily, she's not a runner, but she's promised she's going to run the London Marathon. So well done, Emily. Well done. but although, yeah, you know, things are returning to normal, we want to try and support the NSPCC as much as we can. So we thought our Thursday Brunch guests give us such amazing support. We wanted to open things up to you guys as well. So we're going to send some communications afterwards about how you could support this fantastic charity. We'd also love, you know, you to get involved when we are doing events in the future. So it'd be really good to see some of you there face to face. And you know, if there's anything you need to know, reach out to Emily or I, and you know, we can give you any insight. So we appreciate your support. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, cool. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for bringing that cause to our attention, James. You know, lots of us are either parents or uncles and aunts, or, you know, it's a very difficult time for lots of families, isn't it? And it's nice that you guys are stepping up there. And well done to Emily. She's going to do the actual London Marathon, eh? That's going to be interesting. My wife did the London Marathon in 2017, and barely a day goes by that it doesn't get mentioned. I'm not going to talk about some of the injuries that she sustained on her 26 miles, but yes, he's still 4 years old. She's still bearing the scars. Bless her.
Right. Well, look, Tony, enough about that. I think let's should we get ready for our second guest?
Absolutely right. I'll leave you to it.
Perfect. Okay, so our second guest may be someone you'll know. It's Gethin Nadine. He's Director of Wellbeing at Benefex. Gethin's an author, award-winning psychologist, and he regularly features in publications such as The Guardian, The Huffington Post, and The Financial Times. He's been listed as one of the world's top 101 global employee experience influencers for the last 2 years running. He's listed on the Employee Engagement Power List and is one of LinkedIn's top global contributors. And just to balance things out, he once came last in the egg and spoon race when he was 5, allegedly. Tony, over to you.
Good morning, Gethin. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So Gethin, tell us who you are and tell us about the work that you do at Benefex.
So good morning, everyone. So my name is Gethin Nadin. I'm an award-winning and accredited psychologist. I'm also a best-selling HR author, and I write and talk at conferences about all things to do with HR, employee experience, and employee well-being. And I'm just about to celebrate my 10-year anniversary working for Manifesto. We were a startup when I joined. We now have over 400 employees and more than 1 million people using our platform. And throughout that time at Manifesto, I've had a number of different roles covering kind of product, marketing, sales, customer success. And now, although my title is Director Employee Wellbeing, I effectively lead all of our thought leadership in the market and then use that to inform the products we build and to better support customers. So an average week for me could kind of range from running workshops or consultancy sessions with customers to talking at conferences or events like this, writing articles for HR magazines, supporting our sales team and bids and prospects, etc., and working closely with our product team so we can build products that solve more of the employee experience problem.
And Gethin, from your experience, what has the last 18 months done to the world of work and to our experience of work?
Yeah, so it's obviously hotly debated, this kind of question. And I think there's this illusion that the pandemic changed the world of work, when I think in all reality, all it actually did was just accelerate a number of pretty fast growing trends we could already see in the workplace. You know, home working right across the world was already pretty prevalent in around 1/3 of the workforce, and employee well-being was kind of a top 3 HR trend before anyone knew what COVID-19 was. And so I think where lots of employers have been struggling with the quick changes we've seen to the workplace, there are probably thousands of examples of employers that had already made the change that would better support things like well-being and move to a more hybrid model of working. But I think the most interesting thing where the pandemic has kind of enforced us to do stuff that employers had been pretty reticent to do historically, and that was things like experiment more with kind of trust and autonomy. And you know, many employers were forced to trust their people just because of the way that lockdown forced us to stay at home. And so we had to trust people to manage their own time. We had to trust them to work out of sight. And we had to kind of leave it to them to collaborate more and find ways of working together. But there was a pretty significant positive payoff to that, I think. And I think we saw productivity increase, more collaboration, engagement scores increase. But we also communicated more openly, transparently, and regularly. So many of the customers I work with had CEOs that stood in front of Zoom calls or webcams and told their thousands of people that, you know, we care about you and we care about your welfare and we want to be there for you. And basically this rhetoric changed that, you know, people mattered to our organization and people were an important part of our organization. So it was kind of no surprise to me that during the first lockdown in the UK, we saw employee engagement scores increase for about 2/3 of UK companies, because we started acting the way that I always thought we probably should have. And I think as part of that, the other big change has been, as I mentioned, this kind of reappreciation of just how adaptable and amazing that human beings are. You know, lots of people in our HR thought leadership type industry has talked a lot about AI and automation, and the general public are quite worried about that taking jobs away. But I think the pandemic made us realize that empathy and adaptability of people is actually what helped companies survive. And I think we realize probably more than ever that people are pretty key to our success, kind of whatever our business is. And I think very lastly, the thing that the pandemic changed as well, or maybe even accelerated, was what we as individuals want out of work and the part that work plays in our lives. So, you know, we have evidence that millions of people right across the world were pretty unhappy with the way that their employers treated them during the pandemic. You know, we saw organizations cut the pay of people, but continue to pay senior leadership bonuses and share payouts. We saw that some organizations didn't treat their people right, and kind of in mid 2020, I kind of predicted that the pandemic would lead us to reassess kind of our work and who we work for, and that would probably lead to a mass exodus in the workplace. And at the time, people told me I was talking nonsense, that, you know, people needed jobs, that we had this probably the big squeeze we'd had in most economies, and there was no way people are going to have to be stuck in their jobs for years. And obviously what we've now started to see is this dawning of the Great Resignation, where right across the world there's a very, very strong evidence. I've read about 50 studies that now indicate that around 40 to 50% of people are saying, as soon as the pandemic subsided in my country, I'm going to start looking for a new job. And I know so many people at the moment that just cannot cannot recruit the right people. We know that if you work in hospitality or truck drivers, I'm supposed to have coffee delivered today. That's been delayed by 6 days because they don't have drivers to send the trucks out. It's a first world problem, but it's a big problem when you don't get your coffee. And so I think that, right across the world, we're starting to see people quit in record numbers. But again, if you look at data from kind of 2019, 2020, most people were quitting their jobs at a higher rate than ever before. And so I think as soon as that period of recovery comes back in, that post-pandemic recovery, we're going to have to deal with a lot of people who just very quickly go back to, do you know what, this isn't working for me. I can go on LinkedIn tomorrow, I can click a few buttons, have an interview within 2 days, and I'll be handing my notice in next week. And I think that's going to be a big, big challenge for employers, is how do I keep the best people working for me?
And Gethin, what we're talking about today is working unusually. Have you got an example that you think really crystallizes companies who are doing this successfully?
Whilst the pandemic changed so much for us, we stopped handling money, we shopped online more, video calls became the norm, and those inequalities came to the surface, and employees, I think, started to find better ways of working for them based on their home lives or the inequalities that they might have faced. And so I think what was kind of once unusual is probably going to become the norm, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that office becomes designed around the things we can't get at home. But I've also started to see as well that we're starting to reevaluate how do we measure productivity and the success of the individual. And anyone who's familiar with the role model, the results-orientated work environment, back in 2010, the experimenters who came out with this theory and started working with companies like Best Buy to test it were shot down by experts and said, this is never going to work. People measured, you get input in and there's time and then there's output. And that's how the calculation worked. And so I think, that experiment from 2010, I wrote about that in my book in 2017. Even people in 2017 told me it was rubbish and I was speaking a load of shit, that this was not going to be the way that we started to measure productivity. But I think, the idea that we should be valuing output on its own and separating that from time is something we've done as part of this mass experiment in hybrid working. So this really unusual way of so what happens if I stop measuring somebody on time and they just do the things I want? And if you ever had a sales team, for example, if I had a salesperson working for me who's had a £500,000 a year target, and in the second week of January, they walked in through the door and they signed £1 million deal, I'm going to be pretty happy with that. So I shouldn't really care too much whether that person does nothing for the rest of the week. They've done exactly what I needed them to do. And so I think that's an extreme example, but I think that working unusually is this idea that, well, maybe I can just let somebody get on with it. And if they decide that in the middle of the day, they want to go shopping for an hour and a half because that's what they think is going to make them more productive or give their mind time to settle so they can come up with new ideas. And so I think that kind of change from typically usual to an unusual way of measuring productivity and better ways of valuing output is something I've been really, really excited to see. And there's a couple of examples we've seen amongst Benefex customers that I think are really interesting. So we have a large accountant customer of ours that has now started sharing photos to their social channels of their employees working on beaches and by the side of swimming pools, where they're basically saying, if you want to work remotely and you work remotely from the side of a pool, fill your boots, you're measured on output. One of our big customers, Ocado, they basically issued a press statement to say, if you want to work for Ocado and you want to move overseas and keep your job, we're going to facilitate that as much as possible. We have a sustainability company that just added female toilets to their wind turbines in the North Sea because they realized if they're going to be more diverse, if they're going to accommodate some of that quality, we need to create a place for a safe space for women to go to the toilet, not just men. So they've had to kind of go to these wind turbines and add toilets. And that's something that they probably would never have considered if we hadn't brought up some of the inequalities, on the back of things like the merger of Sarah Everard and things like that have happened in society. And then on a very small level, something that we've done at Benefex, which I really, really like, that we rolled out last week, is we've issued staff with 3 different badges for them to use during video calls. And they're kind of a sun, rain, and a cloud. And the idea is just to describe your mood. So you don't have to go to somebody to say you're not in a good place. You don't have to ask for help. You can just wear a badge that will hopefully start a conversation, or will allow us all to give each other a bit more breathing space. So if I see that, Tony, you've got your cloud on, then I know that you might not be having a great day. So that will change the way I interact with you. You know, can I make that day better for you? Can I take some work away from you? And I'll be really interested to see how that changes. But, you know, huge change, unusual way of working, because we're being a lot softer with each other. And I think that's a really big step forward. And I don't think being soft with employees is a dirty word or dirty phrase.
And Gethin, a final question for you this morning before we let you go is, what would your top piece of advice be for our audience?
Difficult to choose one, so I'm going to try and expand that to kind of 1.5 or something if I can. I think we need to ask people more what they need and what they want, and really listen to what they tell us. I don't think we should be passing off what they tell us or give them excuses as to why we can't do the things that they want. You know, people have got us through this pandemic, and I think the least we could do is kind of ask them what they need and try and deliver as much as possible what they need to be successful. And an example I always use is, you know, famously we hear about people like Mariah Carey having riders when she goes on stage, this list of things I need to perform best. If you're part of the England football team, the night before a match, you know, you're given a nutritious meal, you're given rest, you're taken to a spa hotel, because everyone's focused on how do I get this person to perform the best. So why don't we think about our employees the same way? Why aren't we thinking, my sales guys have got this really big pitch tomorrow. Why don't I just give them the afternoon off so they can go and play golf or have a walk or do whatever it is to get into the mindset so that they perform, rather than let's just squeeze every minute and every hour out of employees. I think the pandemic showed us that there are unique characteristics of kind of resilience, emotional intelligence and flexibility that people bring to businesses. As I mentioned before, I think they're quick to adapt, they generate ideas, they provide great customer experiences. And I think that ability to empathize and sympathize was valuable. And as I mentioned, but beyond anything currently a machine can achieve. So I would say the big piece of advice would be invest in your people, spend time with them, spend money on them if you can, be experimental. You know, for years before the pandemic, many people would argue with me about hybrid working wouldn't work in their organization. But for 2 years, for many of them, we've proved it has. And for some of those businesses that told me it would never work are now recruiting people from overseas and are opening offices in different locations and have people working for them who started working the last 6 months who are hundreds of miles away from the office. So they've really kind of grabbed hold of flexible and remote and hybrid working. And it just makes me think, you know, what else is holding us back? We need to cast off the old ways of what we think about work and how we measure productivity and how we engage people. You know, there are companies out there that I work with that are experimenting with, as I mentioned, new ways of measuring productivity, or changing the idea of what the working week is and what the working hours look like, and really putting their arms around employees and holding them tight and really caring for them. And so I think, yeah, asking employees, being open, being transparent. And I don't think anyone listening to this needs to be $1 billion business or have a large budget to be a great employer. I think most of this is just about care, about caring for people.
Wonderful. Well, Gethin, I think that's a fantastic place to leave it. Thank you very much for your time this morning and for sharing your thoughts and expertise with us.
Thank you very much. Hope it was useful.
Really lucky on Thursday brunch normally, and we've got some great sponsors, including Anna Cleland, who works and owns a business called Workcappy. So we're going to hear from her very shortly around her business and what she's been doing.
Hi, I'm Anna and I'm the founder of Workcappy. We're so excited to be sponsoring Thursday Brunch and really can't wait till we can all be back in the same room together again. Stuart asked me to say why we love sponsoring Thursday Brunch. And do you know what? It's just about the fun. With such great cooking, great guests, the insights, and even the singing. These guys really know how to put some fun into our work lives. So It's just the perfect fit for us because at Workcappy, we believe life is too short to be unhappy at work. And happiness for us isn't about material things such as cool offices and perks. Those things are all great, but they have a short-term impact. Instead, it's about understanding what you spend your time doing at work and how it makes you feel, who you spend it with, and actually the absence of things that make you unhappy. We also recognise that we're all beautifully different people with different motivations, needs and wants in life. So to be happier at work right now can be very different for different people at different times. So with all that in mind, we developed Workcappy, a unique app that enables people to evaluate, monitor, and then improve their happiness at work for themselves. Workcappy gives colleagues access to confidential, personalised insights, which get really to the root of what's working well and what's not working so well for them at work right now. It then helps them to articulate exactly what they want to be different, to identify what's realistic, and then commit to self-determined action to make things better. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more, please reach out. We'd love to connect. Otherwise, enjoy Thursday brunch.
Brilliant. And I'm hoping that Rob is with us from
Workcappy. Can you hear me, Tony?
Hey Rob, how's it going? You're right.
Yes, great, thank you. Unfortunately, Gerald Anna's got COVID, so bless her. So I love coming to your lunches anyway, so I'm here. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, yeah, give our good regards to Anna. Yeah, I hear she's crook with the dreaded COVID. You couldn't have joined us at a better show because we're talking about the future of work. We're going to try and spread the love because you've got a very special offer for people who are on the call today, haven't you?
We have, and I'd like to thank, I guess, Natalie for priming Workcappy. It's nice to have James and you guys bring like-minded people together. Given the challenges we're all facing, we want to help people navigate these challenges, and we really want to re-engage with all people and organisations one by one so everyone can flourish and be their best selves. So if you're interested in finding out about our unique workplace happiness assessment tool, then we'd love you to register interest in Workcappy by contacting hello@work-happy.com before the end of the week, quoting #ThursdayBrunch, which we're pleased to say will secure your organisation a 20% discount on Workcappy if they move ahead.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you very much for that, Rob. That's really, really kind of you. Thanks for your very kind offer. And I know you got some stiff competition because we're giving away chocolate bars and you're giving away world-class consulting expertise that will make people's lives better. But, you know, we're happy to try and hold our own here. So
they mutually combine.
That's
the way give the energy.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us. And yeah, as Rob says, if you want to get in touch, you've got the contact details there, or please feel free to contact us and we can put you guys in touch as well. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for everything. Thanks, James.
All right.
It's all right. Time for our third and final guest. Fingers crossed. Okay. Go on, Tony. Disappear.
Okay. I might disappear.
Oh, please, no. Okay. So we're hoping third and final guest, Luke Keat. Luke is head of culture at Redico, and he firmly believes traditional business structures are dying. And they were well ahead of the curve. So in 2017, they went through a complete revolution of the company culture, which led to Redico managers removing all management titles, introducing self-set targets, and letting the team choose when and where they work. Did the revolution work? Well, let's ask him. Tony, over to you.
Good morning, Luke. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to talking to you a little bit about Redico.
Wonderful. Well, let's start there, Luke. You're head of culture at Redico. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so my role is essentially to try and create or foster an environment where people can be at their best and work at their best and ultimately feel engaged in how they work. Because so many people aren't, so my job is to try and encourage that where I can.
And Luke, you were already working differently pre-pandemic. Tell us some of the things that you were doing.
Yeah, so we started sort of changing the way that Redico worked and kind of ripping up the rulebook and the framework of that around 2017, 2018. And we'll kind of go into the reasons for that a little bit later on. But since kind of that cultural revolution, as we try to call it, we've been having unlimited holidays. People can take as much leave as they want to. They could already work from home when they wanted to. Then it was kind of like a work anywhere type policy. So working the hours they wanted to, where they wanted to, taking the leave they wanted to, paying people for the sickness that they take, sort of trusting people to be honest and open with us and believing the best in people. Removing hierarchy as well from the company was a really big thing. So really changing the way that the business works and management works by focusing on getting people to do what they enjoy and getting people to take responsibility and take more accountability, more ownership, and ultimately decentralizing power within the organization rather than saying that we're going to create a team of powerful bosses. We're trying to create this powerful team that can take more ownership and step up and really do what they enjoy and ultimately hold each other to account. And that's kind of social accountability.
And as you got there, was it a light bulb moment where you go, look, we clearly need to do something differently? Or was it a series of small steps?
Yeah, so I suppose it started from a realization that we've been focusing on the wrong things when it comes to culture. So ever since the business was founded back in 2012, we've always wanted to create this fun place to work. And we've done that. We wanted to create this good office, people who enjoyed coming in, enjoyed their work, enjoyed being around sort of their fellow team members. And in the past, we've been to Budapest and Barcelona, we've been skiing as a team, with lots of nights out, lots of events, lots of dinners and drinks, all that type of stuff, and trying to create this fun environment. But then in 2017, we started using the NPS survey internally. And thinking that as a school we'd be getting an excellent or world-class from our team, it was only a good. And actually there were a number of detractors who, as kind of the NPS shows, they would be happy to kind of move on if a different offer presented itself. And this, I suppose, was the light bulb moment where we realised that as a company we've been focusing on the wrong things and not what culture really was. And rather than trust and freedom and responsibility and engaging people in what they're doing, we were trying to kind of do the cherry on top, as you will, with all those fun extras that you kind of get as part of the perks and the benefits of being part of a nice to work at company. And so this then led kind of the directors of the business to think we need to change something here. We need to speak to the team, find out what it is we're missing out on. And some of that was like confusion and frustration. Some people saying, look, why can I not come into work at 10, but other people can? Why do my manager say that I can't work from home, but other people can? Why do we have micromanagement? Why are there clicks forming? Why is there always confusion and frustration and problems? And ultimately it's because we were a growing agency. We were going from sort of 10 to 15 to 20 people in quite a quick rate. And as such, these teething problems start to happen. This happens obviously throughout the business world. And it was almost like a breaking point where you can either stop and listen and start to address these challenges, or you can carry on and let those issues kind of boil beneath the surface almost, and kind of just simmer there, and eventually something will explode. And so this was that light bulb moment where we sat down and created a manifesto of changes, where we had the Redico of today, sort of the Redico of 2017, and what we wanted a future Redico to look like. And that involves sort of speaking to the team, finding out what these problems, these pain points were, finding out how we could run a business more progressively, how we could rip apart the traditional frameworks of business and think, well, how can we do this where we're putting people first, where we're focusing on engagement and sort of saying to people, look, we're going to give you full trust, full freedom, full responsibility to really do a great job. And there's so many agencies and companies around the world and these really sort of inspiring thought leaders when it comes to culture that we started to learn from. And this helps us to shape this initial manifesto to really kind of create this utopian society of what a future better workplace could look like. And ever since, it's kind of been like I haven't really looked back, to be honest. Just sort of continue to kind of roll things out over a period of, well, initially a period of sort of 12 months to roll the initial manifesto out. And then since then, it's just continual change and constant evolution, because you never get to a perfect place when it comes to culture. And so I'd be foolish now to say that it's actually perfect to work with Redico, because it's not, and no business is perfect. You have to constantly listening, constantly adapting, constantly changing what we're doing as a business. But yes, that was, I suppose, the light bulb moment, was that team feedback.
And if we can dive into the specifics for a second, Luke, can you tell us a story of how you do something different today compared to how you might have done it back in 2017?
Yeah, so a big one is decision making and kind of where responsibilities sit. So one of the things that we've introduced more recently, so not even as part of the original manifesto, is the advice process. And the idea is that everybody in the team has clear-cut responsibilities of what they're responsible for, what they can make decisions on, what remit of the business their focus is on. And so if you then want to change something in your area of the business, you can kind of do that without having to get approval for it. There's no kind of need for that approval because it falls under your remit, it's your responsibilities. The only thing that we say, the only caveat, is that you need to get advice from people that would be stakeholders, may have an interest, may have kind of previous experience in whatever it is you want to do or change. And then the onus is then on you to either, you can take that advice, you can listen to some of it, you can take a little bit of it, you can disregard it all entirely. You then propose a solution based on that advice, and again, get your feedback and rolling out that change. And so rather than, I suppose, historically, what businesses do is you have that approval where it takes months and months and months to really get anything done. This advice process means that someone can come up with an idea, get some advice, and roll it out within a day.
And were you inspired by other organisations, or was the driving force coming from within the business?
So a bit of both, I suppose. So that initial drive was from the business to change that, to really look at how we could become different. And then the inspiration, I suppose, a lot of different sort of areas. So one of the things being just reading books and reading about different organisations. One of them being Maverick by Ricardo Semler, who is based in kind of South America, and went into this organisation and completely changed sort of the framework for it. So if there's people interested in that, 100% recommend that as a book. The Happy Manifesto is another book which really changes the game and gives you sort of the opportunity to think about how you can create these happy workplaces, and makes you think about hierarchy and leadership and management in a different way, and starts to kind of what is it you want from management? What do you want management to do in your business? It starts to get your brain thinking about different ways of working. So there's lots of different things. Like the Corporate Rebels is a really modern one and a really good example of them just going out and speaking to these different leaders who are doing and challenging the system and almost kind of reinventing the way that business works on the day-to-day. So there's so much inspiration out there for people to use. And then even more in depth, you've got Reinventing Organizations by Project Balloon, which is just looking at self-managing organizations, which we are now, I suppose. We don't have that hierarchy. It's very much about the teams coming together and almost making decisions and driving the business forward. And Reinventing Organizations shows how this is scalable in not just an agency of 40 people, but as a multinational company of thousands and thousands of people. There's lots of sort of good examples of different industries and different sized companies that are doing things differently as well.
So that's interesting. So that's the what we did and the why we did it. How are we doing? Has it been a success? Give us some numbers, tell us some stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started this, as you kind of recall, it was the initial kind of team MPS, which was good, we wanted to change. Since that rollout, so by the end of 2018, so 1 year on from that initial manifesto, that team MPS had jumped up to world class over 96. And every single quarter since then, we've run the same survey. Every single quarter it has been world class since then as well. So that team engagement has gone through the roof. The client NPS has also followed it. So again, when we started this, we had an excellent score. Since rolling out those changes, that again jumps up to world class. And again, that's continued to be on world class for our client side. So it shows that they're happy with the team, they're happy with the clients. We've been named as one of the best places to work in the UK. So we were fourth and fifth respectively in the last couple of years. Which shows again that all that is done through sort of anonymous team feedback and team surveys that go straight to Great Place to Work. So it's not us just sort of selling ourselves and want people to outside sort of people sort of judging that. It's the team sort of judging that experience and how they find Redco. The finances as well have kind of followed. And while it's difficult to correlate cultural change to finance and say this is exactly the reason why we're more successful, it also shows that making these changes are really, I suppose, all the upheaval hasn't had a negative impact on the finances. So in the immediate year after this change, our revenue went up 40%, profit went up about 90%. And again, this year as well, we're looking at a revenue going up about 30%, despite kind of coming out of the pandemic. And just sort of trying to make sure that as a business, we can kind of ready the ship and continue going. Which again is a good success story. In the pandemic, we didn't have to make redundancies. We didn't have to we didn't struggle through it. We managed to keep going as normal, which showed that maybe the business and the way it was set up for this, especially post the pandemic, it wasn't a case of, right, we need to jump on this here and start working remotely and change the way that the business runs dramatically to combat the pandemic. We were already doing it beforehand, and it kind of helped us to ride through that storm. And then when it comes to health and well-being, one of the good stats is that actually is sickness, obviously absence and unplanned absence is a real drain on a lot of businesses. And our kind of sickness rate per person is about 0.39 days per year. I think the average in the UK is 4.1. And so that's come down dramatically as well since all of these changes. So we've seen really good results from team happiness, from well-being, from a financial side, and just general kind of that team vibe as well.
And looking to the future, Luke, what have you got planned for the next 18 months or 2 years?
One of the challenges, I suppose, is as you move from being not necessarily small, but kind of a smaller agency into one that's growing rapidly, how can you make sure that this process works and continue to work at scale, and that people you're bringing in are able to adapt to this change? A lot of the challenges that people face coming into the agency is that they're used to working in a very corporate, traditional way. And although they come and they say, I joined Redico because of the amount of trust, the amount of freedom, the amount of responsibility that you give people, when they join, it's almost like, oh, I didn't expect it to be this much. Like it's really, I'm struggling to get my head around it. So that's one of the challenges. And also for us, how can we continue to push this even more? How can we become more transparent? So we have a radical transparency when it comes to the finances and sharing of those within the team. And all the kind of meeting notes are shared around to the whole team. So everyone's got insight to every department, including the board and directors as well. All of that stuff is shared across the agency. And so kind of how can we continue doing that more transparent? Can we go towards our transparent salaries? Can we go towards self-set salaries? There's all these different questions that we can ask and continue to push agents forward.
And finally, Luke, a last question for you. What are your 3 top tips for companies who want to follow in your wake and work unusually?
Yeah, so the first one it would be is just, I think, speak to the team. Would be my first tip. Speak to the team, find out exactly kind of where their pain points are, where those frustrations are, where those thoughts or concern are, and how that can change as an agency or as a company. And then from that, start to compile, almost like what we did in Manifesto, and I can share this as well, our original Manifesto, to give you some ideas of what that looks like, but almost kind of clarifying what your values are, what your purpose is, what you actually want your business to look like, what are the reasons that you're making this change, and be really clear about exactly what it is you want to do and where you want to get to. You don't need to have a real staggered list of stuff you're going to do at that time, but just thinking this would be a dream, I suppose, to get to this point. Like this is kind of our map for the future. And then lastly, just start to kind of roll that out, and rather than just throwing everything in at once. Like one of the things we do now is removing budgets from things and saying to people you can spend what you want to. But if at the time we'd said, right, we're just going to cut budgets completely, everyone can just spend what they want, it would have gone wrong, it would have failed, it would have blown up in our face type thing. So you've really got to think about what's going to work now, how can we build momentum, how can we roll this out slowly, creating a roadmap of change to really sort of push your company forward. Because the moment you stagnate, you start rolling things out, people sort of lose interest and momentum sort of stops. So how can you build that roadmap to constantly change and constantly evolve going forward?
Wonderful. That's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for sharing your skills and your expertise with us this morning.
Not to worry. Thank you for having me.
Another great interview from my perspective. Thanks, Luke. I really love the decentralized ways of working personally. And it's great to hear they're well ahead of the curve. 2017, you know, who would have thought?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's lots of great things out there, isn't there? You know, I thought it was really interesting he pointed out when you join a company like Redico, you've got to be ready to be different as well. You know, you can't just say, oh, I want them to be different, but I can do the same old thing. So I thought that was a really good point.
Fantastic. Good.
Yeah.
Should we look to the future, Tony, about our next event? Yep.
Yeah. So next time round, we're going to talk about who killed employee engagement. According to the Harvard Business Review, something close to £1.5 billion is going to be spent on employee engagement in the not too distant future. But many of us working in that part of the world know that the dial isn't moving. And we're going to ask the question, why is that? And we've got 3 truly brilliant guests along. We have the founding father of employee engagement, Professor Bill Kahn, who's joining us from the States. It was his paper back in 1990 who started this whole conversation off. So it's been wonderful to get his thoughts. Blair Palmer is joining us. She's a culture specialist. And Cliff Etheridge, who once said, employee engagement is dead. Long live the employee experience. So we'll be asking him to unpick that and tell us what he moves. So that's us done for today, James. I think. What was it like for you first time in the hot seat? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, all good. I think the pandemic probably an accelerator for change, but maybe not the catalyst for change. There you go.
Wow, look at that. I like that. That's
profound.
Yeah. For me, something like work has always been changing. You know, it has, hasn't it? You know, since work started, work has been changing. It's a bit different now because we're planning the change and we're more aware of it. But you know, what got us here is what's going to get us into the future. We have the right set of skills. We just have to deploy them properly.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate you having me. First time.
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. I think there's a bit of pressure on Stuart Thomas's place in the team, to be honest. I think that's quite good. It's all good. Maybe this could be like the one show. We have guests as new hosts every time around. So we're going to have the Q&A now. So if you want to hang around and chat to Luke and to Natalie, please do. Natalie, we're going to ask you to announce the winners, if that's okay.
Sure. Are you going to let me know who they are so I can announce them?
I am. I'm going to get you up on the screen first, so hopefully you can see that. And then if you go to the chat, Natalie, hopefully.
All right. I'm in the chat.
So I'll just remind ourselves, and Phil at the same time, that we want the first 5 people to type the words Barcelona, because that is where you live, I believe.
Yeah, It is indeed. That was correct.
So the first 3 people win some coffee.
You got them. So
I think I've got, is the first one we've got here, is it Michelle Wise?
that's right. Michelle Wise, Alex Covey, Laura Moore, Sarah Cooper, and Leslie Orman.
Awesome. Well, we will be in contact with you, lovely people, and we will get your addresses, and we will get coffee to the top 3, and as long as the book and the chocolate, and 4 or 5 will have a read and some chocolate. So fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing the books, Natalie. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.